Mr. Harris, this question goes to you, and it's related again, and maybe you guys can maybe answer this question quite succinctly and quickly. If elected mayor, would you be willing to make a significant commitment to the Minority Women Business Enterprise Program by hiring a director who would report directly to you and having greater responsibility for achieving the goals of the program?
Absolutely. This is what, as you said, what we've been talking about before, is that you've got to begin to open up City Hall. Yes, post it online. Yes, bring people in. Yes, form committees and talk about this. But you also have to begin to bring in people who have not been there before and have different ideas and come from different perspectives at this particular time, such that the old boy network goes away in City Hall. It's one of the things the Republican Party in this city is very much dedicated to at this particular time. It's interesting how we're all here, I think, a little bit small businessmen. I'm a physician. I have a nurse, a social worker, a secretary in the office. We all have these difficult problems, and we all know the problems of running a business in the city. But we need to open it up and bring other people in so that we can have a much fairer city to work in.
Question of how you would staff this. Will you hire someone directly to report to you on this matter, Mr. Smiley?
Yes. Until we get it right, until we start meeting our goals and get this right, this position will report to me as mayor. It has been the central theme of my candidacy, and it will be the primary focus of my administration to grow our economy so that we can meet the obligations that are coming. We have taxed ourselves to death. We have cut to the bone. The way forward for our city is through economic growth. And our diversity is our strength. The richness of our neighborhoods are what makes this place special. And all of the small business people in the minority community and women business owners are part of what sets us apart and is how we're going to succeed economically. And so while this is important to me because it's a value of mine, it's also a strategy for how we're going to move forward and grow economically. And until we get this right, that person will report directly to me.
Yeah. Mr. Solomon, did this person report directly to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to do more. We know that. We've worked on this, but we need to do more. And I will not stop until we stop with 10% MBE and WBE. And then we'll move it up from there. But you have my commitment. We'll get this right, and we'll get it moving. And we won't wait until the election's over. We'll start right away. Thank you.
So the simple answer is yes. And that person will report directly to me. I'm not a minority. The reality is I do not know how it feels to feel what minorities and women in our community feel. So I think I have to work harder than others to understand and be responsive to a community so people, everybody feels fairly treated. And so the answer is yes.
Mr. Alonso, same question about reporting.
So the answer is absolutely yes. There are two numbers that I'd like to talk about. So the requirement is 10%, but in actuality, minority-owned businesses receive somewhere around 1%. 1%. That's how far off we are. And I thank some of the leaders in this community and actually in this room that have brought that issue to light. The second thing that I want to emphasize is that, so 10% is just the floor. This is a majority-minority city. Getting to 10% is not the goal. That should be the very, very rock-bottom minimum. The goal is to get this up to 50, 60, 70%. And for that, we have to increase the number of businesses that qualify and that are applying for these jobs. And not only do I want this person reporting directly to me, but I want them to think outside of the box and think creatively of how we can bring this number up to 50 and 60 and 70.
Minorities are now 67% of the Providence population, huge majority now. What then is your plan to ensure? What is your plan to ensure that the City of Providence personnel reflect the current demographics of the city of Providence?
Great.
As I mentioned earlier, both taxpayers and citizens going into City Hall still face a place where they have to know a guy to get something done. And I think this extends to hiring as well. And honestly, there are entrenched interests that have been around for a long time, and those entrenched interests don't look like the citizens they serve. And so what's important to me is that we reform the way in which hiring is done at City Hall. It is not important to me who's related to whom, but rather who is most qualified for the job. And it is particularly important to me that in all of our departments, most especially our police department and other public safety personnel, that they reflect the community for which they're serving. And the outward-facing departments and entities that are interfacing with our community beyond the four walls of City Hall are serving their community in a way that they know best because of their personal experience.
Mr. Sullivan?
Absolutely. Diversity will be important in City Hall. I do it in my business. I have it on my campaign, and I'll continue to do that at City Hall. Everybody's a part of this city. Everyone in this room. Nobody is excluded. And that's the way we're going to run city government.
What do you do as mayor to make certain that the city's personnel reflect the changing population of this great city?
Well, let me start by saying that there are many, many talented and capable people in every part of our community, right? From nations all over the world, from, all kinds of ethnic backgrounds, persuasions, and so on. So, I am absolutely committed, and always have been in the work that I've done over the years, to having the folks around me reflect the people that we serve. And that's the way City Hall should be, not just in the mayor's office, but throughout City Hall. I think it's one of the ways in which we will begin to make some progress on things that are unfair in our community. Young black men being singled out for possession of marijuana and being sent off to prison. People being unfairly profiled and taken aside. That has to stop. And one of the ways we do that is by having every department in our city hall reflect the people of our community.
Sure. I mean, I agree entirely as well. I'm someone myself who I wouldn't be here had someone not believed in me and opened the door and given me an opportunity. And there are two areas in particular that I really want to highlight where this is of primary importance. The first is in the police department, and second is in the schools. Every single police officer will tell you that the most valuable weapon that they have for law enforcement are the relationships that they have in the community. And this current police academy is the most diverse in the city's history. I pledge that every successive police academy, I will do my best to make sure it continues to be the most diverse in the city's history until the police department reflects the city that they serve. Second, I believe upwards of 75% of children in the public schools are non-white. Upwards of 75% of teachers in the public schools are. And so this is something that also has to be addressed in the same way that it's being addressed in the police department.
Thank you. Mr. Hart.
This should be an easy thing, and we shouldn't be sitting here discussing this. It should be easy because, when I ran a mental health center with over 100 employees, the easiest thing was to put together a personnel committee of hiring who were very much attuned to these issues and, in fact, were minorities, and went out there and looked for people who looked like them and thought like them and worked like them to bring into the organization. And that's what should be done here. But I'm going to have to put Mr. Smiley on my payroll here talking about entrenched interests. And that's the problem in City Hall at the present time. We've had a series of mayors who wanted to step up and have not wanted to go against the entrenched interests. And so they're not willing to handle the personnel issues and to bring in people who don't look like them and think like them because they need support when they step up. We need different people in City Hall, and you need to elect people who are not part of the old boy network when November rolls around.
Okay, good. Thank you. Providence has worked with private, non-profit institutions that do not pay taxes to establish a payment in lieu of taxes. This program can serve as a model to help increase Providence employment. Considering that proposal, what would you do as mayor of Providence to ensure companies that receive tax breaks hire Providence residents? Mr. Sullivan, the question to you first, sir.
And that's a good question. We have First Source. When I took over as council president, First Source was not working. We set up a commission to study First Source. The commission came back with recommendations. We implemented those recommendations, but there's still more to be done. And if we're going to give out tax stabilization, we're going to make sure that they're tied to the MBE, WBE, First Source. We're going to make sure that those jobs stay in the city of Providence. They stay in the community. This is a partnership, and it has to work for everyone. It just can't work for the developer, just can't work for the city. It has to work for all of us, and that's what I intend to do.
Well, I think that any time a company is getting a tax break like that, that we all the taxpayers of Providence are giving that organization. I think that hiring of Providence residents must be given a high priority. They obviously must be qualified for the job, but all things being equal, it seems to me right and fair and in all of our collective best interest to hire Providence residents first.
So I come at it from a very simple and fundamental perspective. If you're a corporation or a large business that comes asking for a government subsidy, that's going to come with restrictions. And those restrictions must be policed. So we have to make it a priority in City Hall to make sure that there's one person or one department that's policing each of the promises that the corporation or the business made in order to receive the subsidy. And the kinds of restrictions or the kinds of promises that I will demand as mayor are not just that they create jobs as a building gets built, but most importantly that they create a pathway to careers, sustainable careers, and careers that give people access to climb that ladder to reach the middle class. There's something that's happening in our neighborhoods. This idea that people can bust their butts, work their entire lives, and stay mired in what's being called the permanent working poor. That's unacceptable.
Mr. Hart?
I come at it from a slightly different, well, very different perspective, I suppose. I'm not much in favor of tax stabilization and handouts to private companies with this type of thing. So I don't expect to get entangled in that type of thing. I think where we have already become entangled and tried to pick winners and losers in the economy, something that government is terribly bad at, which as we know from 38 Studios, then we need to go back and enforce it. I would certainly have a much more friendly approach to those nonprofits that are currently in the city, the colleges and the like, looking less at the pilot programs, the payment in lieu of taxes, and more on how they can come into our schools and into our government and to help us with this type of thing. One of the things we have that Detroit doesn't and Baltimore doesn't or in other, as much trouble as we are, is we have world-class institutions, educational institutions in this city that are more than willing to become involved in these type of issues.
And Mr. Smiley, please.
Yes, the First Source Ordinance is not unlike our MBE and WBE challenges, which is that we can and should do better. A lot of this can be done through technology by putting information on board and holding ourselves accountable by reporting out how we're doing on First Source. Additionally, there are funds generated every year that get scooped into the general fund by the mayor and the city council doesn't give us the resources necessary to fully invest in making sure that we're implementing First Source. But I think there's something more and new that we can be doing. We have almost half of the land in our city is tax exempt because of these institutions. Past mayors have negotiated over payments in lieu of taxes, and I think, frankly, that they can do more. And one of the things that I would negotiate with the hospitals and the universities over is getting a commitment from them to hire locally and include into their supply stream local vendors so that we all benefit from having these institutions which are tax exempt in our community.
Thank you. The next question concerns public schools here in Providence, and the mayor plays a big role here in Providence public schools. Are you in favor of decentralized decision-making in schools by giving voice and decision-making to principals and local shareholders, teachers, and the like? I believe Mr. Harp is the person to take the first question. Did I get that right? Am I off track, guys? I can't.
I just went last.
Mess up every now and
So
then.
Lauren goes first, I guess, right? Yeah, Lauren goes first, I think.
Lauren, right. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. My belief is that schools function best when we give administrators authority and hold them accountable for the performance of the school. When we give teachers authority and we hold them accountable for performance in the classroom. I think one of the most difficult things in our system is too many things are being forced on our teachers, too many things are being forced on our administrators. The ground is always shifting, the rules are always changing, and that's not good for our children, and it's not good for our teachers, and it's not good for our schools.
So, Marion, yes, I absolutely believe in decentralization. My vision for the public schools begins with this idea that each school building is the central institution that brings together an entire neighborhood. Why is it that schools are closed in the evenings? Why are they closed on weekends? And why are they closed all summer when community meetings, when kids, when arts programs, when public health organizations, they're looking for space and they have services to offer. Let's bring everyone around the neighborhood into a school, whether you have a child there or not, whether you live in the city or not. I want everyone to have some contact and some touch within each school. Because if you go to some of the schools that are falling apart across the city, and you bring the neighbors into the school, there's no way that they're going to stand for water coming out brown in the bathroom or the ceilings leaking. There's nothing more powerful than engaging an entire community around the school, and that's what I want to do, empower people on the front line.
Yes, I'm very much in favor of the principals in each school really being in control of the school and setting the direction for the school. Clearly, there has to be some general thing coming out of City Hall, coming out of the school board, coming out of the school department. But in generally, the putting these practices into place is really the job of the principal. The neighborhoods in the city are quite different, and they need different approaches in order to teach our children. So I'm very much in favor of that.
Generally speaking, I also support turning over authority to local schools, but it only works when there's a strong and effective principal in place. And we do not yet have strong and effective principals in every school in our city. And so we need to work to increase the ranks of good principals so that they're ready to handle and accommodate this additional authority and autonomy. You know, I hear from teachers and principals alike that they feel like they're getting whiplash from constantly changing direction from the school department. We are always 1 year into a 3-year plan at the Providence Public Schools. We started a program called Site-Based Management, which turned over additional authority. They pulled back from that program. We spent another $1 million on a consultant, and now we have a thing called Autonomous Schools, which looks a lot like site-based management. This type of resource misallocation has to stop. I think principals and community and neighborhoods do in fact know what's best, but it only works when there is a strong and effective administration in place within that school.
First and foremost, we need stability 5 superintendents in 12 years is unacceptable. We need to rebuild our schools. They need to be quality schools. We can't expect teachers to teach or children to learn if there's no heat in the classroom or there's not enough books to go around. That's number one. We need that autonomy. We need to have strong principals. We need to have strong teachers. But we need to give the teachers the leeway to customize their teaching methods to fit the needs of the children. And that money that we waste in middle management, we give it to the school so they could use those resources for teaching coaches, for math coaches, to help our children out. That's how we're going to tackle that problem.
Do we keep Superintendent Lucy on, Starlin?
I'm just saying we need stability.
Adrian,
Our
do
superintendent.
we keep Sue Lucy on as superintendent?
I would say yes.
Mr. Rosa?
Two things. I think it's irresponsible for us to make a commit. I'm sorry, Lauren. I don't mean that. But I cannot responsibly make a commitment about a position that important, because then every other agency has, well, are you going to create me or the other? But I will say this. I value continuity for its own sake, and I do believe she's done a very fine job.
Mr. Harp, did you keep the superintendent?
I wouldn't promise that at this point, no. I need a long talk with her about certain concerns I
Mrs.
have.
Brown?
I think I've made a policy to not comment on any specific person, but I'm happy to talk about the qualifications I'm looking for in all the positions.
Good.